The story doesn't start with people being deported. It actually, the failure of the British government, especially when it comes to the Windrush generation, starts from the time that they actually got here. So, as descendants of people that came in the Windrush generation, like, let's talk about how it was. First of all, the lies and deceit. There wasn't, and you know, it's so funny. You said before that people in Jamaica talk about there being money on the streets and stuff like that. This is I don't know who started this rumor and is deceiving us. Do you know, in one of my favorite trash shows, Real Housewives of Atlanta, Portia said, "Who said that?" There's an ongoing thing about who said that, and literally this thing about there being money on the street is the world, like even people in Rwanda, Uganda, all over Africa, there's this sense of there's money growing on trees, there's money on the streets, people just give you money for free. And I have to say, who said that? Because it's a lie. But let's start from what are the experiences of your grandparents and parents after they arrived here and now leading up to the scandal?
My grandfather, he decided to come to this country in 1958. Incidentally, my father was also born in 1958. So my grandfather left before my dad was born. So he didn't know my grandma was pregnant with my dad. So
that's left. Very common.
Yep, he left before, right? And then my grandmother joined him when my dad was 10 months old. So my dad was 10 months old. He was left with his grandparents, and then he came to the country 5 years later, 5-year-old, by himself on a plane to meet his parents, really in his head for the first time, and then finds out that he has one brother and 2 sisters now. So he's 5. He's already now the oldest. He's got his 3 siblings and his parents that he doesn't know. As far as he's concerned, his bonding is with his grandparents. When you're that young, you bond with the people that look after you, and if they're not your parents, and then now you're going to live with your parents, it's going to be odd for you for a long time. And also, he feels like he was treated differently because he was the one that was born in Jamaica. He's the one that's meant to be responsible. He can't get away with the things that his brothers and sisters got away with. Even with his personality, his personality is different to all of them because of how they're brought up. But yeah, my granddad came over and he worked Metro Camel. They used to make trains, and then he moved to British Leyland, which is the company that makes rovers. And then my grandma, she came over. She worked part-time. She was mainly a housewife, but then she worked in the factory. So this factory, I don't know if it's actually still in Birmingham now, but my mom said she knows 2 people that worked there that ended up dying very early because it was in a factory that they didn't have any masks or anything like that. My mom said her auntie died at 48. My grandmother died at 58. Because these are the kind of jobs that are there, especially in Birmingham. You're in a factory, but it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe. The main thing my dad remembers about being a child was that it was difficult for him to even connect to someone because he didn't really connect with his parents. Even though I see them differently, because when I was born, obviously I'm a grandchild, and they're like wonderful grandparents, but they're different to him because in his head, that is not his parents. His grandparents are his parents in his head, even though he left them when he was 5. I can't. Obviously, I'm not faulting my grandparents for doing what they did because they were young. They just got married the year before, and obviously, my grandfather was ambitious. He wanted to, a better life for himself. He was trained. He was qualified to do work that he couldn't do in Jamaica, so he wanted to go to Britain quickly to do something that they promised would make his life better. So he went and he did it. That's down to the Britain's marketing of what Britain is like and how your life, how you think your life is going to be. But then the other thing is, a lot of people didn't actually expect to have to stay there when they got there. Some people moved and thought, I will be here 5 years, build up some money, and then go back. Most people, the majority, people thought they would go there, come here for 5 years and go back and build up your country. But when you come here and realize the money that you're actually getting, how difficult it is to get the money that you want to go back, and it being so expensive to go back, you end up just having children and staying. And that's why I'm here. I'm a dad's side.
Listening to your story is actually really, it makes me get emotional, to be honest. I think it makes me emotional to think, after all the stuff that Black people have been through, and then your grandparents have come here, and the jobs that are readily available to them are jobs that risk their health. It's like it just breaks my heart, I think, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just your grandparents. It would have been a lot of people who went to Birmingham, and not just Black people. Like it would have been other people who were also trying to get jobs that are readily available. But it's actually heartbreaking. And it just makes me so angry that the government then decides to create a policy called hostile environment.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called? They just need to kick rocks.
Yeah.
Because nobody who sat down in that cabinet office and made those laws have ever worked in a damn factory. Not one of them.
What's weird about it is how similar my dad's experience is to my mum's experience. It's a little bit different, but it's similar. The same way my mum was one. First of all, my mum's dad had left from time. I don't even know if I don't know. I think he was gone when she was pregnant. When my mum was pregnant, my grandma was pregnant with my mum. I think he was already gone by then. And then my grandmother left when my mum was one. Right. So she also, when she came to the UK in 1971, being an 8-year-old, she had 8 years of living with her grandmother. And meeting this new mother, this person that's supposed to be your mum, it was just a weird thing for her. My grandmother left for slightly different reasons, because I think in Jamaica she was probably slightly more privileged. She was maybe 23 or 24 when she left. She also wanted a better life because, like I said, Jamaica's streets aren't paved with gold. So if you think you're going somewhere where the streets are paved with gold, that's better, isn't it? So that's where my grandma left. My mother actually came on a Jamaican passport. She had that same Jamaican passport all the way up until 2004. So from 1971 to 2004, my mum had a Jamaican passport. Now, what's happening now is scary because that could have happened to my mother at any point in that time. But at the same time, my mum said between 71 and 2000, you didn't really need a passport like that. You didn't really need one. Right now, we need one just to get a job. If you get a job, you got to bring your passport to prove that you're British. You didn't need that then. The only reason she changed because her older sister, my auntie, told her, look, things are getting a little bit weird with the immigration thing. Get your passport now. And it's lucky she did it when she got it when she got it. Otherwise, my mother could be in the situation that a lot of people are in now. Just like that. She didn't choose to come here. She was told to come here when she was 8. And it's been here ever since. But someone could say, no, get out. It could have been that simple if she didn't act when she acted.
That's so sad. Can I just say that that's an aspect that I hadn't even considered.
Which aspect?
Like, it's like not only the effect on families when people were being deported and detained, but also the effect on families when they initially were leaving their families to come here. And in some aspects, it's the same as a lot of people who are even now, they'll come, like one parent will come first and try to apply for visas for the rest of their family to join them, and in some instances it takes like 10 years, or many people have taken 10 years without seeing their families, but for it to happen to a whole generation like that, the impact it's different if it's like a one-off, but a whole generation, and then and a lot of them, like you're saying, like the majority or the Windrush generation were coming because they had been called upon to help rebuild the UK, to rebuild Britain. It's a bit I hadn't thought of that aspect.
My mum's experience is actually quite similar, which is the norm. Like, everybody kind of went through the same situation. So my grandparents came to Jamaica. My mum was the youngest of her siblings. So my mum is really close to my auntie, who's 10 years older than her, because actually my grandparents went ahead to England and they sent for, and every Caribbean person knows what that means. It means you complete the paperwork and you save up money to bring your children over 1 by 1, 2 by 2, however you can do it. And it's not cheap. So my grandparents sent for my mum to come over, but she was the youngest. So I think, she didn't necessarily feel like she had to be responsible at all. However, she was given opportunity like that some of her friends from Jamaica didn't have. And she came when she was 13. So she came when she was 13. Similarly, she came by herself. I think she came by herself. I don't think she came with with my auntie. She didn't say she did. And obviously my auntie was much older than her, so she was the one who was like, okay, well, you're allowed to go to Jamaica. So there's pressure already there. My mum had also grown up with, like, for the majority of her life, not her parents. Like, she'd grown up with an auntie in the country, do you know what I mean, who was given almost like guardianship over her. So dealing with all of that, which many people actually, if you went to go and see a therapist or a counsellor, would say that's actually quite a, I don't want to use the word traumatic, but it's a big life change. That's a big change to go from one country and one environment and one way of living to a brand new environment. And I think, you know, that's not just something that Black people have, or the Windrush generation. That's what a lot of people who do migration to different places go through. But it's different here because obviously my grandparents and my granduncles and grandaunts were invited, and I could talk forever about like what my granduncle told me about how life was when he tried to, you know, rent a room here. It actually makes me really, really teary, because it's, people treat them like less than nothing, and they were invited to come to this country, and like Lyndon's grandparents did jobs that were readily available to them, and they were really skilled individuals from the Caribbean, and that stuff still goes on today. And I think that's what makes me so angry currently about the situation that we're in. People are still emigrating and migrating around the world, and depending on where you're from in the world depends on whether or not your education, your skills are deemed to be equal to the country that you're going to. I would be extremely surprised if anybody who was white went to the Caribbean and was told, sorry, your qualifications aren't good enough. I'd be extremely surprised. I don't know how it is in Africa, but it makes it that stuff that I think is really heartbreaking, to know that you've been invited to a country, you've gone through your own huge period of unsettlement and change, you have to come here and go to school, assimilate with people that you've never met. My mum had never seen snow before. She said the first time she saw snow, she ran outside and stuck her tongue out. You know, but she was like, she's never seen it.
People
and then her
coming
parents
from
were like, get in the house.
My mum and my auntie said when they got out of the plane, they ran back in the plane because it was too cold.
My mom says the same thing. Like my mom says the exact same thing about it being like the weather being a main thing. Like, I don't want to stay here, but obviously the circumstances that my parents came to this country in is slightly different. They came when they're older. So my dad was 24, 23. And he was also invited, which is probably not the norm. So usually, I think most of the stories from other Commonwealth countries, and I can't speak on anyone, but especially I can't speak on everyone, but especially more recent migrants, was that obviously that same thing of like, there's a better life in the UK, let's go, let's make a life and let's bring our family over. But for my dad, he was invited by the British government to come and do his Masters in Kings. He actually hadn't thought about coming, but they were looking for him.
I just want to say, that is actually Black excellence. Clap for your dad.
Go Dad! Clap for him. But yeah, no. So that's a whole different story. But he hadn't thought about it. They looked for him, and he just heard word of like people looking for him. The government, the British government looked for him, or High Commission looking for him. Anyway, came here, came to do his Masters. And like, it's funny when you said about having your qualifications not even being recognized here. So he came to do his Masters in Maths and Technology, and even after getting his Masters from King's, he had to be a taxi driver because no one would hire him. He had to work in 7-Eleven, worked at 7-Eleven. He was working like odd jobs because people still wouldn't hire him with the qualifications that he had. And then he decided, you know what, let me just train myself and give myself IT skills. Like, he did a whole course by himself, like on like reading the books and going through the work by himself at home, because he realized that there's a lot of jobs in IT. And that's how he first got into his work. I think he ended up working for a charity. I think it was Save the Children first, in their IT. Yeah, but it's crazy because even sometimes you think, oh, maybe it's because they don't respect our education system. But actually, when it comes down to it, it really didn't matter. And it doesn't matter. Like, you can go to the same school as everybody else, and they just don't care. Even if they sent for you, they don't care.